Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to the very first episode of the Life with a Y podcast. This is the interview series where we find out why my guests do what they do, but today is a little different. Today is a solo episode, you're stuck with me, sorry, and today I'm going to lay the foundation as to what you can expect in season 1. I've been recording these episodes for a little while now, and today I'll be showing you what you can expect, everything from the format of the episodes, what I talk about with my guests, why I started the podcast. There's also the fact that as I was recording these episodes, the format of the podcast and the format of the series changed. So I really want to explain to you why I changed things as we moved along and as we started to record more. I'm also going to tell you a little bit more as to who my guests are. There's a theme running through them, so I want to explain that, and where the name of the podcast came from, although some of you have already guessed why. So, I think that's enough of an introduction. Very much looking forward to showing you episode number 1 of the Life with a Y podcast. Let's get cracking. So, as promised, the goal of today's episode is to give you a peek behind the curtain as to why I started this podcast and what you can expect over the next couple of weeks. I'm going to start with why I started the podcast. I've noticed that there are quite a few podcasts that focus on what people do or what you can copy with successful people. A lot of the people that I will be interviewing and a lot of my guests will be successful in their world, in their particular world, to varying degrees of notoriety. However, they will all be successful in certain elements of it. And rather than doing a podcast as to what learnings can I take? How can I copy you? How can I steal elements of this and bring them into my own life? I tried to just focus on the person and understand why they do what they do. One of the things that you'll notice with my guests is everyone from season 1 comes from the world of sales. Now, there's a reason for that. I too, big part of my life is the world of sales. And before you start to roll your eyes or before you start to think that this is just another sales podcast, it's not. However, I'm very biased in this. I think salespeople are particularly interesting. We put ourselves into a hostile environment every single day, whereby we help people to buy, but there's a negative stigma around sales. And I've found some of the most interesting people that I've ever come across have worked in the world of sales. Now, that's only for season 1. There will be more guests from quite a few different areas of life in season 2. This is my first podcast, so I wanted to start with something that I knew. However, all of my guests in season 1 will come from the world of sales, the world of business, and we really get to deep dive into why they do what they do, why they picked this career, what drove them. There are commonalities, but there's a lot of different stories. Some really, really, really different stories. And it's funny that a lot of these different personalities have ended up in a similar path. And I think I hope that you find the same thing too. The goal of each of the conversations is to truly understand my guest, to really understand what they've been through, where they are, where they've come from, and why they do what they do. And the answers will be very surprising. I'm not going to give it away. That's what you got to watch the rest of the episodes for. However, some of the conversations that I had really surprised me, and I'd switch off the Zoom call after an hour with somebody and go, wow, I did not expect to have a conversation like that. You can guess which episodes that's in reference to. But yeah, I didn't want to just do a podcast taking tips and tricks and hacks and, how can I be like you? How can I be successful? That's not what this is about. This is understanding people's stories, understanding the journeys, and understanding the values of people that are quite successful in their field, and understanding why they still do what they do particularly when these people have choices. And that's one of the things that you'll learn. A lot of my guests have choices, and they still choose to do what they do, and we'll walk through some of the decision-making patterns. You'll recognize yourself in some of my guests. You might recognize yourself in all of my guests. And I think that's what's really unique about this, or really interesting about this. You'll recognize elements of yourself in every single one of my guests. And we do that because we end up talking quite vulnerably in each of these conversations. I hope you enjoy it. Very much so. Hope you enjoy this podcast. But now that you've learned why I'm doing what I do, let's chat about what we're doing. Let's chat about the format of each episode, because there's a very strict format for some episodes and a less strict one for others, and I'll come back to that later. However, there is a standardized sort of format for this. The introduction, in my introduction, with that really funky music at the beginning, I'll introduce you to my guest, and I will give you the information that I knew about my guest before they came on the podcast. I'll tell you why I wanted to talk to them. I'll tell you who I thought they were before they came on. I'll tell you how we got on, how we interacted before. And the reason I'm saying that is my perception of each of my guests changed as I interviewed them. And I think that's something that might be visible and you might be very evident as we go through. But I wanted you to understand where I was coming to the conversation from. Next, we introduce you to the guests. And there's an element of this that I really wanted to avoid. I really wanted to avoid people just talking about what they do. So when they were talking about themselves, which is very important in this podcast, I didn't want them to just start talking about what they do, which is very, very easy for salespeople to do. Just start talking about what we do. It's a comfort area for a lot of us. So I start off with questions that might be a little bit strange, and I start off with questions that will evoke some emotive language. I want you as a listener to be able to understand the way my guests speak, the way they think, the thought patterns that they have, what they look like when they smile, what kind of memories they have. That's how I want you to start, to be able to get a glimpse of somebody talking about something that's really personal and really interesting to them, and to really get a glimpse rather than just reaming off CV points. That was something that I really, really thought about for the very beginning of each episode. But for section 2, you can't talk about why we do what we do before we look at what we do. So the second element of every episode is understanding what my guests do. There's a difference here. At the very beginning, I'll have told you about what I think they do. My interpretation as to what they do. Not necessarily in just a career sense, but then we move on to their personal interpretations, and there will be some differences. And the question that I'll ask is, what do you think that you do? Or what do you do in your opinion? Or something along those lines. And the reason I ask that is we might have slightly different interpretations of ourselves to other people's interpretations of us. And sometimes the differences can be quite striking. So we talk about what they do, not just in a career, but in day-to-day life. And it's really interesting here to hear people explain their versions of what they do. But then inevitably we crack into the why. And I ask every guest, why do you do what you do? And I get a wide variety of answers. But that's not where it ends. In every episode, based on the conversation we've had in section 2, I will give an outsider's opinion. I will give an external view of why I think you do what you do. And that's not really the most important part. What's important is everybody's reaction to that. And that's something that will be very, very interesting as we go through. Because the reactions are my favorite parts of every episode. Somebody will tell me why they think they do what they do. Or I will start off by saying, here's my hypothesis as to what your why is. And the reactions are where we get some really, really beautiful moments, some really vulnerable moments, some really interesting moments. They're my favorite parts of every episode. However, we can't get there without the rest. And the rest is really interesting. Some of these people are really inspiring. The way they think, the way they talk, the way they express themselves. It's a really, really, really interesting way of looking at the world. And At least in my opinion. I hope you agree. And then, in typical podcast fashion, we end with them promoting something or chatting about themselves or finding out where you can find them. What's really interesting is the wide variety of all the things that we talk about. We talk about life, love, health, sickness. We talk about values changing. We talk about the most important moments. We talk about travel. Everybody's story is very, 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 very different. However, each one is equally as compelling. And I think that's most important here. You will be able to pull bits out of it, but this isn't a podcast whereby you just come in, you listen to a successful person talk, and you walk away with a load of things to do. This will give you a greater appreciation of the word success and the word successful. At least it has for me. That is what the podcast looks like for most of my episodes. However, there was a big change. Now, as promised, there was a change in the way I expected this podcast to go and the way I expected the series to be laid out. I'll tell you that story now. This series is laid out in 3 parts with a number of guests. The first 3 episodes are with James Buckley, a really well-known sales trainer out in the United States. Then, I have 3 standalone episodes with young, successful people. Daniel Kine, who is the CEO of OpinionX. Holly Allen, who is a BDR with G2 and well-known on LinkedIn. And Joachim, or Joe Van Erps, who has built out sales teams in the past and is about to join a company called Miro. And then, my last 3 episodes are also a deep dive into another person who I haven't found yet. And there's a reason for that. So, let me explain to you how this format came about. I knew when I started this that I wanted my first episode to be with James Buckley. However, I didn't want him to be the first person I interviewed. I had heard him in a number of episodes before, in a number of interviews before, and I knew that there was a lot to this man. So I wanted to talk to other people and run a couple of other episodes so that I was more comfortable in episode 1. I hope that makes sense. Now, here's what I did. I recorded my episode with Daniel, I recorded my episode with Holly, and I recorded my episode with Joe. And then I got James on the phone, and I got James on for episode number 1. And I ran episode number 1 the exact same way that I had ran all of the other episodes. And it went okay, but I didn't feel very in control of the conversation. Not that James overpowered in any way, shape, or form. However, there's just so much to get through with that man. Anybody who's listened to him in the past, or anybody who has come across James will know the man has a history. And I kept feeling that we were touching on different points. We were looking at the heads of different icebergs, but we never actually got to deep dive into any of them. So after the call, we had a conversation, and I was like, look, we didn't get to deep dive as much into who you are. Would you like to come back? And he said, yes. So what we did afterwards was we recorded 2 more episodes going back over some of the little points that we had touched and really deep diving into them. The formative experiences, the values, the changes in his life. And it's a really interesting story that I think requires the 3 episodes to really understand who the man is. I know it's very, very, very hard to condense 30-something years of life into 3 episodes, into 3 one-hour-long episodes. I think we did an okay job. I'll let you be the judge of that. However, the way that my episodes have now run is I've got 3 episodes with James Buckley. I've got 1 with each of my other younger guests, and I still don't have my 3rd one. And I've done that deliberately. I want my first 3 episodes to go live. I want to gather some feedback, and then I want to find my next guest. They will be the last 3 episodes, and then I'm going to do a final episode of, pulling out some learnings. It'll be another solo episode, so you'll get to hear more of me. And then season 1 will be finished, and I'll start work then on season 2. That is how this season is going to run. Each episode is very important in and of itself, and there are so many learnings that you can take from it. But the main thing I want you to take from the season overall is there is no one path to success, which is something you'll have heard before. However, the differences that you will see in each of these people is gigantic. And I really hope it's something that comes across over the next couple of weeks. I'm really excited to hear about what you guys think of my episodes, what you guys are expecting, what was surprising, what wasn't. But we'll come back to that later. I'm very, very, very grateful for all of my guests who've come on. We've shared some really vulnerable moments. And I really hope that you enjoy them as much as I did. As for the name of the podcast, Life with a Y, this was a very eye-opening moment when a lot of people didn't understand why I named it the way I named it. So, allow me to tell you a story. The name Life with a Y came about from an amalgamation of a couple of different things. The first one being the contents of every episode. Everyone that I'm interviewing lives life through a particular why. They know why they're doing what they're doing. And they are living their lives through this why. That why has changed as they go through their lives. However, they live life with a why. And understanding their why. However, there is a second thing. It is a pun for those of you who have guessed it. And there's actually a little story behind this. My name is Bryan. My name is Bryan with a Y. Bryan. It's not particularly unique. I think it's mostly spelled with a Y over in America, a little less so over here in Europe. However, the with a Y element of my name has kind of become an element of my personality over the last little while. A lot of you will know, or at least those of you who know me in person, will know that I graduated from college in May of 2020. And throughout my entire 4 years in college, I was known as Bryan with a Y. That started in first year. It started in the very beginning. And it just became an element of my personal brand, from everything from my time in musical theatre to my time in student politics. That was just an element of the way people knew me. I have friends whose parents don't know me as Bryan. They only know me as Bryan with a Y. As in, they'll say something along the lines of, "Oh, Bryan's coming over today," and they'll pull a blank. They have no idea who that is. But then they'll say, "Bryan with a Y is coming over today," and it suddenly clicks. It suddenly makes sense. I've had friends texting me BRYANWITHAY as just my full name, one word. So it's an element of my personality that I kind of enjoy. It's a little bit unique, but also not unique. And I wanted this Life with a Y to also have an element of myself, an element of me in it, even though most of it is about my guests. So, Life with a Y is a combined element of my personal brand, or at least the personal brand that was given to me throughout my time in college, and also the fact that all of my guests understand why they're doing what they do, and I think that's quite inspiring as well. So, that is most of the information that you're going to need to decide whether or not this is a series that you want to be a part of. We've talked about the format of the show, we've talked about what I discuss with my guests. We've looked at why I started the podcasts, the commonalities between my guests, even why I named the show. For those of you watching, actually, for those of you who don't know me, and for those of you watching the videos, this is the way my hair actually looks. All of the episodes between 1 and 6 or between 2 and 7 were recorded during lockdown, so that's why I look like a sheep. But over the next little while, I really hope that you enjoy this journey that I've been on, and that I really hope you enjoy being a part of as well. This is my very first podcast. This is the first time that I've done anything like this, so I do have an ask. And it's a very simple ask. Actually, I have two, now that I think of it. The first one is please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Now, I cringed when I said those words. There's a reason I said them so fast, but there is a reason I'm asking for that. And there's a very standard actual reason, a very logistical reason why I'm asking for that. Once you get 100 subscribers on a YouTube channel, you get to pick the URL of the channel. Right now, it's just a number of letters and random letters and numbers. I'd love to be able to personalize it. I'd love to be able to make it easier to find. So it would be greatly appreciated if you could subscribe to that, purely on a logistical thing. I'm not going to tell you to smash the like button or to click that bell for all those notifications. Actually, do you know what? If you want to click the bell and turn notifications off, I won't hate you for it. But yeah, I'd very much appreciate that, just so I can add an element of personalization to that particular medium. For those of you who prefer to watch it on YouTube or put it on in the background on a YouTube tab. The second ask that I have of you is, like I said, this is my first podcast. Your feedback is gold. Your feedback is absolutely golden to me. Things like, I enjoyed that, I didn't like that, this was my favourite part, I hated this. This was a strange question to ask. This was an answer that I wasn't expecting. Did you mean this when you said this? All of these are really, really, really important building blocks for me to understand what you think, why you think it, whether or not I went deep enough on somebody, whether I glazed over something that you think I should have gone deeper on, whether you felt I was in control, whether you felt I wasn't, whether that's important. All of these things will be really, really, really important to me as the series goes on, so that I can build better for a season 2. I'd very much appreciate feedback, and you can find me pretty much anywhere. Instagram is a great place. I don't love Twitter, but I'm on it. And if you want to leave comments under the YouTube side of things, a lot of the trailers for each episode will be on LinkedIn, as well as the Instagram. However, the episodes themselves obviously won't be. You can find me there. There's also an email. You can email me. I would very much appreciate the feedback, pretty much anywhere. Just Life with a Y, the letter Y, podcast. So Life with a Y podcast at gmail.com, life with a Y podcast at life with a Y pod. All of those should bring you to me. If not, Google or just put in Bryan Mulry, and you should be able to find me somewhere. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is episode 1. I cannot stress enough how excited I am to hear your feedback and to go through this journey over the next couple of weeks, this next 9 episodes of guests. Numbers 1 to 6 are already recorded, so I cannot wait to hear what you think, and I'm still on the lookout for guest number 2. I've got a lot of things churning away in the background. I cannot wait to make those. As always, I very much appreciate you being a part of this journey. Thank you very much. And very much looking forward to the next time we're talking. Regardless, I hope you're having a good day, and I will chat with you again soon. If nothing else, I really hope this podcast helps you to answer the question, why do I do what I do?